Welcome to Anatomy of a Training Session. Now, Carl and I experimented with this fun little workout earlier on today, and we want to share some of our reflections on it with you. Carl, what's the workout?
All right, really quick. A 3-minute clock at a sustainable intent. We went 5 hang squat cleans at 135 and 95, 10 burpees to a 6-inch target overhead, 15 wall balls, and max calories on the assault bike in the remaining time. We rested 3 minutes, and we did that for 8 sets. My gosh, I am tired after saying that.
8 sets indeed. Well, guys, make sure you like and subscribe as you watch this video, and we're going to share the why behind that workout with you. So as we break down the anatomy of this training session, Carl, I think a really good place to start would be intention, because we have to know why we're doing it and what the purpose is behind it. So you programmed this piece for us. When you were sitting down there writing out those 8 sets, 15 wall balls, what were you thinking? What came to mind in terms of intention?
Yeah, I kind of titled it in my head what the intention was going to be. So in that title, it was challenging muscle endurance in a non-complementary setting, right? Like in an aerobic setting, I guess, is what the main intent was. So it was having exercises inside of it that challenged muscle endurance without giving you a break between each of those exercises. So we weren't doing push-ups and air squats. We were doing a squat pattern, an extension squat pattern, a squat pattern, and then we were using our quadriceps on the assault bike. So it was to challenge muscle endurance in that aerobic or that sustained setting.
Got it. What does muscle endurance mean?
Yeah, so muscle endurance is just your ability to push work out while your muscles are being challenged. So it's like my muscles are very tired. Do I have the endurance to keep going?
You said non-complementary versus complementary, so just to clarify, if we were looking at complementary work, it'd be 2 different muscle groups that would be working, 2 different movement patterns. So like you said, it could be a squat and a push-up. But for this piece of work, it was non-complementary because it was back to back to back, that same pattern. The squat clean, we've got that extension and then the squat, the burpee, quads are involved on that. We obviously have a squat on the wall ball as well. And then that bike is that squat pattern also, so.
Yeah, so it's and I put inside of there, we're challenging muscle endurance, not only in the muscle and in the pattern of movement, but also in the global extension and how that's happening across the board. So just think about when you do a clean, what's happening? You're globally extending your body over and over and over, right? And then when we get to the burpee, what's happening? And you mentioned that you felt this as well. It's like we're globally extending our body, not only in the sprawl to the ground and getting back to our feet, but now we're asking ourselves to jump up, extend, and touch this target overhead. And then we go to the wall ball. What's happening? You're catching this ball and you're extending it overhead. So it's not only in the quads and the muscle itself, it's not only in the pattern, but it's that extension that's happening across the board where the range of motion is just so high that the blood pressure increases, and to sustain that work as time increases or the load increases over that time, it just becomes really challenging.
Yeah, it does some fun things to your heart rate, that's for sure.
Yep.
Okay, last piece on intention, sustainability. We talked about sustained intent across those 8 sets. What does sustainability mean in the context of this work?
Yeah, just being able to output the same amount of work, not effort, right? Like we want that effort to be similar, but let's be realistic. As you compound work, effort will increase. So if we said like, okay, what is your RPE? Like let's say you did this workout at home. What is your RPE on set 1 versus set 8? The work might be the same. You might be 18 calories, 18 calories, 17 calories, 18 calories, but you're going to say, yes, set 8 was just more challenging than set 1, right? So it's the ability to sustain that same amount of output set over set over set, not necessarily to sustain the same amount of effort set over set.
And in terms of measurement of that sustainability, for us, we were looking at the calories.
Yep.
So on that assault bike, from set 1 to set 8, the goal would be to make sure that the same number of calories is being performed across all 8 sets, and you're not seeing 27, and then you're finishing at 12 cals.
Yeah, and you have in the back of your mind, like, I need to rein this in a little bit because I understand I have to do this another X amount of time. So you're always thinking about that. It's not just like fight to the finish, get as many calories as you can, hope and pray that you recover between sets, and then get as many calories as you can. There's some gamification that's happening inside of one's head when they attack a piece like this.
So that's intention, non-complementary, muscle endurance for sustained intent. So let's go structure now, Carl. You were sitting down to map out this work. What is the structure and why?
Yeah, so this is, I would call it a hybrid of a 4-task and a 4-time piece, because it's a little bit of both of them. So we're asking you guys to attack the 5 reps on the hang squat clean, then you're doing the 10 reps on the burpee, and then you're doing the 15 reps on the wall ball. So those are task-based things that we're setting out. And then we put this time element. We're saying, hey, we want this done within a 3-minute clock. Now accumulate as many calories as you can inside of this 3-minute clock. So it's a hybrid. We have these tasks that we have to complete, and there's also this time element. And that's probably a bias thing on my part. I just really enjoy those sessions because there's a lot that can happen intra-set inside of them, because it's one thing to say, okay, once I'm done with this work, I'm done. But it's another thing where you're like, I'm also against this clock where I have to continually do work until this clock hits, in this case, 3 minutes.
I really like it from a coach's perspective, because when you're sitting down to program that, you're able to control the total number of volume that someone is doing in work. So instead of just a 3-minute AMRAP where there are some unknown elements about how many actual squat repetitions are they going to do over these 8 sets, where you have the task and then the time element at the end, you know they're going to do 15 wall balls times 8 sets exactly. You know, that is exactly how many repetitions are going to go inside. So there's some cool control that you can implement. It does require coaches to be a little bit more deliberate in what they're prescribing though, because you have to know that the person that's doing the workout can do the work in the appropriate amount of time.
There's nothing worse than like prescribing something and your client's like, well, I wasn't actually able to do that, and you're like, oh crap, sorry about that. So that's a really good point. You have to think about those things prior to prescribing that.
Yeah, which is great practice to think about, you know, time of each repetition, and to begin to develop that understanding as a coach, I think is a fantastic skill to have.
And then just to end it on the structure here, it's also really nice to understand exactly how long someone is going to work. So if it was just task-based, there's some guessing that occurs, right? Like let's say we cut it after the wall ball, we would probably be thinking, like I came off the wall ball at 1:22 to 23 each set, right? So we have to know that with who we're prescribing that to and how long we're prescribing that rest for. So if we're like following the concept of like, I want work rest to be about 1-to-1, you have to say like, okay, I think that's gonna take them 90 seconds, so I want them to rest for 90 seconds. And we could sometimes be off on that. Or if they don't sustain that over these 8 sets and the work just ended and it was like 90 seconds, 110 seconds, a minute and a half, a minute 45, and then we're 2 minutes, and then that rest is shrinking, that can be challenging for people. So just the clock format gives a coach direction on how much rest to give them as well.
Definitely. I mean, it can be a little overwhelming sometimes when you're trying to track those rest periods for yourself. So there's a nice, again, element of control that comes from having the 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off. You know this is going to take you exactly 39 minutes, so you can mentally wrap your head around it a little bit better than just task-based work. Last piece on the structure, Carl, why 3 minutes on, 3 minutes rest?
It's just what I chose. I looked at the work and how much work we were doing, and I thought about 5 minutes at first, and I was like, that's probably gonna be a little bit too much time on the assault bike, and that would have just extended it a little bit more than I wanted to. I wanted it to be almost like 1-to-1. I guess that's where that came from in my head of like working versus working on the implements versus working on the assault bike, and then the rest being 1-to-1 to that 3 and 3. So it's that 1-to-1 work rest ratio, and then 1-to-1 task versus ending it off on the assault bike.
I'd say you nailed it.
Guess so.
final piece of the anatomy of this session, Carl. For who is it designed?
Oh man, yeah, like all work, it should be for someone that's capable of doing it and it aligns with what they want their outcomes to be. So would I give this structure and this nuance to someone that has absolutely no goal of pushing muscle endurance or they're not a competitor or anything like that? Probably not. But that's not to say that there's not some really good exploration that can happen in these sessions, but if someone has zero amount of connection to this, I just wouldn't give it to them. And then of course, if they're not capable of doing the work that you put in front of them, I wouldn't give it to that person as well.
Yeah, considerations of what it means to be capable of this kind of work. I mean, you're not throwing it at a brand new beginner. They've spent a considerable amount of time in cyclical work, in complementary work in aerobics before they're actually coming in and doing something like this where it's squat, 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 squat the whole way through.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
they have to have some experience doing this type of work or these exercises specifically in this setting. If you have someone that's never had a heart rate of 140 and lifted up a barbell before, like you shouldn't give them this work. Like that, there needs to be a progression to get to this point. And sometimes you'll give clients this work and it won't go well, and that's okay. There's some really good learnings that can happen. What's not okay is if you're like, okay, next week I'm going to give them the same exact thing, or I'm going to give them a similar session. So it's not always going to go as planned, but we can learn some really good things from those mistakes.
Definitely. And sport-specific application, for the most part, this is going to be for someone that's competing in mixed modal, right?
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't give this to like a baseball player. They're probably not going to see a bunch of benefits from doing a session like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want you guys to join in on this workout with us and be able to experiment yourself with some non-complementary muscle endurance training. So let's talk about some substitutions and modifications because we're all at different points in our fitness journey. So we had the hang squat clean, we had the burpee to a target, we had the wall ball, and then we had the assault bike. Most people can do an assault bike, so I think that we can assume that that option is available to you. What about the other movements? What are some alternatives?
Yeah, so let's keep in mind that the alternatives that I'm going to give, they're with the intent of challenging muscle endurance in complementary settings, right? So the squat, the quads, and that global extension. So I wouldn't say, grab a really heavy kettlebell and do 5 kettlebell goblet squats to emulate the hang squat clean, because we're missing that dynamic element. We're missing that global extension and you being able to control your heart rate and all of that coming out of that. So for that piece, I would keep it more dynamic. So if you don't have a barbell, or if you're not capable of moving that barbell through space like that, consider doing it with a dumbbell. So dumbbell hang squat cleans or dumbbell power cleans into a front squat. You could do the same with a pair of kettlebells. I wouldn't recommend this one over the other ones, but you could do a kettlebell swing, right? Because that is global extension in effort. We're missing the squat. So, there are variations of the kettlebell swing where you can get some extension and squat down and catch it. Wouldn't recommend that for most people, but you can use that kettlebell swing as well. Going into the burpee, I would say that if someone's not capable of just doing a dynamic burpee, like I wouldn't even try to challenge this or even be in this realm of exercise. But if someone has a limitation and they're like, I can't, jump up 6 inches overhead or something like that, it's like, just don't do it, right? If someone's like, okay, that's a decent amount of volume in the burpee and my push pattern isn't developed enough, it's like, yeah, maybe mess around with doing some like no push-up work or some sprawls or something like that, just to emulate that movement through space. And then finally for the wall ball, I'm just going to assume that someone doesn't have a medicine ball, because you should be able to, if you're doing this type of work, the person probably is capable of doing a wall ball. So if you didn't have a medicine ball, you can emulate it with like, air squats with a jump overhead just to emulate that global extension, or an exercise like that.
Okay, so we got some options. Guys, make sure you give it a try. Let us know in the comment how it went, and please make sure right now to go ahead and click that like button and subscribe to our channel.